Okay, welcome colleagues. My name is Matthew Horn. I work for Innovation Unit, and we have been working with Zoe and the team have been working with the 10 Pathfinders over the last couple of years, and we're very pleased that we can be joined by our Pathfinder colleagues today. I'd like to welcome Alex and Amanda and Claire. Alex and Amanda from Warrington and Claire from Cheshire Police, is that right? Yeah. And also welcome Nick from Wirral. And we're hoping to be joined by Rachel from Wolverhampton, who's going to join us on screen. And there are some confused looking faces over there in the IT department. So we might have to wait a little bit longer. We have put some questions for you on your tables, which were questions that have been asked in advance of our colleagues, and they've had a chance to look at those and prepare some thoughts about them. So you might want to look at those. I'm going to come to you for your questions, but I'd like to steer you to look at those questions that we've prepared in advance. I'd like to start, however, with a nice, easy question. So the first question I'm going to take is, how did you align these reforms with your existing practice model? And I wonder, perhaps if we can go to Alex first for that. Or Alex Roman.
I'm very conscious that we look like some sort of Pathfinder girl band sat on these stools, so I'm not feeling the most comfortable. I feel like I need to stand up now because I'm about to sing. How did we align the reforms with our practice model? So our practice model in Warrington is systemic practice, so very much aligns with the values you've heard about this morning. So that didn't feel too scary. We thought about how it felt for families. So Blackburn have just talked about that locality model. So thinking about building relationships within our localities, with our early help service, with our local schools. So that was quite a significant move for us. In terms of our family group conferencing, we had an embedded practice model, an embedded model of family group conferencing at pre-proceedings and higher end child protection. So that also aligned with the kind of ethos of what we were doing around families building plans together, which has led us to the kind of next phase around that family network, family group decision making meeting. I'm going to pass to Amanda because I'll have more fluff.
Here's the fluff. In terms of the practice model, I think what we'd certainly reflected on is when we talk about systemic practice in our authority, it has become very much a culture in which we practice within the authority. And I think it was helpful for us to keep that in mind, not only when we were thinking about how we were aligning with the practice model, but equally as helpful to think about when we weren't aligning with that as well. So as you'll all know, this comes with a lot of change, and we need to be really kind of prepared for that with our workforce. And I know Alex and I often discussed how some of those conversations that had to take place behind the scenes, some of the thinking around what next steps needed to be taken, didn't always feel like we were doing whilst we tried to get our thoughts together. We in Warrington had to go through a consultation process as part of a restructure to really align with what was being asked of us in the reforms. And for our workforce, I would think that came as a little bit of a surprise to them, because they were so used to us having that kind of flattened power approach. So within our authority, we all very much sit together. You know, Alex is our head of service. She sits right in the family help service with the social workers. We are all very much one team. And there were parts of this that didn't always feel like that. So I think we did a lot of kind of working backwards once we did have the consultation complete to really make sure that people felt like this was a collaboration. So a lot of kind of more relationship-based approaches to task and finish groups, steering groups, making sure that we were hearing from people at that operational level who were going to be doing the job day to day. And I think that's something that we've really kind of appreciated now going forward, in making sure that those people who are doing the job day to day are feeling heard and seen, and some of those intricate details are really considered. And I think that was where we now we are certainly in a position where we would say that the reforms massively align with systemic.
I've got something else to say. Give it to me. One of the things that was really helpful was the kind of more permission to innovate. So recognise we've still got all the must-dos. So for those of you that are systemic, the domains, you've still got the domain of production, you've got all the things that you have to do, you have to satisfy in terms of regulations. But our changes to our approach to CP really freed that up. So some of the things that Sal spoke about around, you know, you go to this scary building, you meet this person who's a conference chair who you've never met as a family. So our approach, we were able to still do all the things that we will need to satisfy when Ofsted come in, but we've done it, we've moved even more towards a more relational model. So the conferences take place in an environment that families are familiar with, so family hubs, children's centres, things like that. They've met the lead child protection practitioner before, they've spoken about those worries, so you don't lose the worry. The family know we're really worried about what's happening and we need to see change, but we do it in a way that feels more collaborative with them, safer, there's more feedback. So that definitely freed us up and aligned even more with what you were trying to do, but still achieving what we have to do.
Fabulous, thank you. I think we've been joined by Rachel. Hello, Rachel, can you hear us?
Morning.
Welcome.
Yes, can.
Thank you for joining us. So I'd like to put that same question to you, please, which is about how have the reforms built on your existing practice model in Wolverhampton?
Okay, yeah. Morning, everybody. Obviously, I've not had a chance to introduce myself. So, Rachel King, Deputy Director from Wolverhampton, and I've been leading on the reforms in Wolverhampton since we were chosen as a Waveform Pathfinder. So, in terms of the how we've built upon it, I think it's quite clear we were chosen for specific reasons. So, we'd got a good Ofsted rating at the time we were chosen, with outstanding for leadership. We'd got 8 hubs already locality based across the city. So our family help offer was already on a locality level. We'd got our social workers already co-located with our targeted early help staff. And we were also a family hub authority. So we'd turned our 8 strengthening family hubs into family hubs into family hubs over the duration of the family hub programme as well. So we were in a really good position to build on some of that practice. We'd already got as well restorative practice as our practice model embedded across the whole of children's services, and we'd just started to do some work with partners around how we rolled that out more broadly across the sort of wider partnership to make sure that we were all sort of working in the same way with our families in a relationship led way. So the reforms really did allow us to build on that. And in terms of some of the things that we did, our family help space, as I say, we'd already got that co-location, we'd already got co-working relationships between targeted early help and social workers. So we built on that in terms of looking at gaps. So in the early stages of our co-design, we also did quite a detailed needs analysis to look at where our gaps were in provision. So, for example, in Wolverhampton, we identified domestic abuse and targeted youth support as specific gaps in that family help multidisciplinary space. A lot of our repeat referrals, when we looked at them in detail, had got a domestic abuse theme that ran throughout. So we recruited dedicated specialists within that field. So it really allowed us to build on that. And similarly, in the family network side of things, we'd already got an established FGC offer. It was predominantly in that edge of care, more crisis-driven space. So we did do some work to push that down in the system to make sure we could offer it much earlier on, but we were building on rather than starting from scratch, really. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Nick, can we come to you next? I'd like to ask you a question about the early engagement from education professionals. How did you do it, and how involved are they in the family help and child protection work?
Hello. I think what's really important to recognise is that education has a unique structure, and it certainly doesn't fit together in the same way that the other partners do. So really the way that education looks at the questions we're going to talk about today and how we implement those reforms is very different. And certainly in Wirral, we had to establish those senior level relationships at a very early stage. We realised that education couldn't come to the table alone. They needed help from the other 3 partners to do so in a really meaningful way. And in the early discussions with those senior leaders from across the other agencies, we started by mapping out existing contributions of education across the partnership, and we decided where we felt education could add the most value as a strategic and equal partner. And at a very early stage, something that was crucial was to build a nucleus of United Champions, I think I called them at the time. And they were largely based on my connections from my time in school as a senior leader and as a DSL, a designated safeguarding lead. And this core group of people weren't there just to be present, they weren't there just to engage. They were also there to bring others along the journey with them and to have that positive influence and create a culture which was conducive to effective partnership working. And that group sat down and we thrashed out our first iteration of our vision. And that vision changed very quickly over those 12 months. And that was okay, because we were in that test and learn phase that we talk about so often now. And once we had that vision, we looked at what the desired impact of education being in that strategic position would be. And we worked backwards and started to plan our early actions, largely to gain some quick wins, I would call them. We really prioritised early engagement. So at the start of it, we didn't really have a sustainable model, but it was a necessary part of the journey to become a sustainable, strategic and equal partner. And I think prioritising that early engagement also generated the belief, the momentum, the changes that we wanted to put into place in order for education to sit at that strategic table. We also realised that actually in order for education to sit at that strategic table, we needed to educate them because they needed to know what the table looked like, and they didn't. And that's no criticism of anybody. If they've not been in that partnership in the way that the other partners have, how would they know what the core functions and structures of the safeguarding partnership was? So we embarked on a journey to educate not just designated safeguarding leads, but head teachers, safeguarding governors, frontline staff, geography teachers, and that is still very much an ongoing piece of work so that they know what their role is and what their influence is on the safeguarding partnership. And from there, we grew to a more pure education model. So we now have pure education, so education representatives from frontline staff, to chair committees, to sit on other partnership committees as the education representative. And we're working very, very hard now to look at the information flow, how we align our priorities. So organically, we've grown from becoming an education silo within the partnership, really, to involving the statutory partners in our committees and trying to align our priorities with those of the other committees and the partnership as well. So it's been a fantastic journey, but we've got so much more work to do, but we're certainly leading the way in the North West.
So Claire, can I ask you a question about child protection? So how is multi-agency working in child protection? And we've seen the ambition from Greater Manchester Police today. Is it similar? Is it different? What does it look like in Cheshire?
Yeah, there's obviously some differences, but it is quite a similar structure. So we have a vulnerability hub. I'm one of the detective inspectors on that vulnerability hub, and that's centrally based. So originally, we cover 4 local authorities, Warrington being one of those. So we have Cheshire West, Cheshire East, Bolton and Warrington. All work very differently, unfortunately. If they did consistency, that would be a lot easier. So originally, we had referral units in each area. However, due to resources and demand, we had to centralise. So everyone is in one area on the vulnerability hub. But obviously we want to be committed to projects such as the Pathfinder and maintaining and building relationships with social services, whether that be adults or children's. So the journey that we've had with the Pathfinder was quite early on. We've been involved in the journey from the beginning, really, and towards the end with the tasking and finishing groups, and obviously leading on to the MAC PTs. And I suppose Cheshire's in an interesting position because obviously Pathfinder's been embedded in Warrington, and now the MAC PTs are coming in the other 3 areas, and you can see that panic approach now. So we are kind of back where we were with Warrington some time ago, and we're just coming into that space now with the other 3 local authorities. So I had a conversation with Alex earlier on just how useful it would be to use their experiences with the other 3 local authorities to provide them some support when they are putting their structure together and working systems, because ideally, as the Detective Chief Inspector from GMP said, if we can get some consistency across the board at the start, then it's going to make things easier for everyone. So our commitment to Pathfinder, and we've made that commitment to all of the local authorities, is that we have 1 detective sergeant that's embedded within the social care building, working alongside partners, and that offers more free-flowing information. And also they are what's called a triage sergeant. So any requests for strategy discussions for that area will come through them. They'll have the early discussion with the social care manager as to the requirement for that strategy meeting. We've found that we have had a little bit of a decrease in strategy meetings due to that, because we are having strategy meetings when they are really required, whereas sometimes we weren't meeting the threshold but still having the meeting. So it has got rid of unnecessary meetings, but having that early discussion and maybe looking at other actions, early joint visits, and going along that route, rather than having unnecessary meetings. Those DSs not only triage, but they also do the strategy meetings on the area themselves. So again, building up that continuity and information sharing on area, but we can only commit to 2 days a week at present, because obviously they are a central resource, but we are buying into obviously the MAC PTs and trying to offer what we can.
I said I had to be very brief. Just to say a bit more about what Claire said about the strategy. So on a local level, we had lots of strats and lots of 47s, most of which didn't end in conference. So some of that was a good thing. They pulled together a multi-agency meeting, but we were putting families through that unnecessary process. So going back, Claire, you talked about safe uncertainty. We were definitely, our use of strats was more safe certainty, and actually you can manage risk in different ways through effective conversations and multi-agency working. So we've definitely seen that that's supported the system in holding that risk and the anxiety that comes with it.
Fabulous, thank you. Let's take some of your questions. Do we have any questions on, particularly on multi-agency child protection working?
Yeah, my question is, how did you involve families in the development of your multi-agency child protection models?
That's a great question, thank you. I'm going to take 2 more. I think I've got one over here as well, please.
Yeah, I have had the opportunity to speak to Warrington, but I'm just interested to know about whether people have continued to have a separate child protection conference chair role, or you've amalgamated it.
It's a popular question. And one more, please.
So my question as a residential provider is, when looking at children missing from care, some local authorities use different procedures. So we've got Philomena being used in some forces, but not others. So I suppose it's just around my particular area in Cheshire East. what the steps are there.
Thank you. Okay. So we've got 3 questions, one on involvement of families, one on independent chairing, and one on procedures. Who would like to go first? Rachel, is there any of those you'd like to start with?
Yeah, I don't mind. I can pick up the first couple if that's okay, and I can talk about what we do in Wolverhampton in terms of missing from care. So, in terms of family engagement, I think what I would say is we didn't specifically engage with families around the child protection space. They were engaged in the whole system approach. So right from early on, we had a huge co-design phase where families were sort of engaged in terms of what was working well for them, what wasn't working so well. Some of the feedback that we got from families is more around what it feels like to be working with professionals at all levels. So what an assessment feels like, and that feels quite judgmental. So we changed things like our language. So we now call it a discussion rather than assessment. They talked about, some of our SEND families, for example, talked about feeling quite stigmatised, but having to be referred into a multi-agency safeguarding hub if they were just looking for support. So those were some of the high-level bits of feedback we got from families, but not specifically around child protection. That said, we haven't just done co-production and co-design as a one-off activity at the start of our journey. We've continued with that as a work stream throughout our sort of Pathfinder phase, and we regularly get feedback from families around their sort of experience. What I would say is the advocacy offer, although it's not taken up by a high number of families in Wolverhampton, where it is taken up, the feedback we're receiving is really positive in terms of how it's given families a voice, how they felt empowered. So I think what I would say about the family engagement is it needs to be constant. The most difficult thing I think with getting feedback from families and engaging them is some of our families don't know what the system was like before, so we can't do sort of a compare and contrast, and we're trying to do that, I suppose, as practitioners in terms of what the difference is and how it might feel different for them. In terms of independent chair role, I'm possibly not the best person to ask about this because our lead child protection practitioner role is slightly different in Wolverhampton. As a Wave 1 Pathfinder, our design specification stated that the LCPPs were to be case holding. And on that basis, we did have quite a lot of discussion with the DFE in the early days around not getting rid of our independent chair role. We absolutely felt that if the LCPP was case holding, that we wanted to maintain that level of independence at the conference stage. So we have had a recent meeting with DFE to look at our model and how we're currently operating. It's worked really well for us. We have seen a reduction in CP. We have seen a reduction in repeat referrals. We're not looking to massively change anything, but in terms of the case holding element, DFE were quite assured in terms of our model still having the key sort of principles and elements that they were looking for, which were a fresh pair of eyes at child protection planning stage, and that the family help lead practitioner, if there has been one involved, remains that involvement with the family and continues with that key relationship, which our model does do as well. There was some discussion around the independent chair role. I think what they'd like us to do is move towards, even if we do keep a chairing type role, that they are moved to be sitting within the child protection team. So it is something we're giving some consideration to, but as things stand at the moment, that's still an independent role. And then just in terms of the missing from care, we are an authority that promotes and encourages the use of the Philomena protocol. But obviously the response around risk outside the home needs to be specifically considered as part of your child protection sort of planning stage, I would say.
Thank you. So big difference between Wave 1 Pathfinders and Wave 2 around the role of independent chairs. Alex, what's it look like?
We don't have independent chairs, so our lead child protection practitioners facilitate the initial conference and review conferences, and they are kind of alongside the allocated social worker from the point of Section 47. So when we are in significant harm, they are linked in. Part of that is a supportive role to the social worker. We've recognised we have an inexperienced workforce, like a lot of you will have a high number of newly qualifieds, and if you don't, I'm very jealous. So they will be able to offer something more enhanced in terms of seeing progress within review periods, going out alongside the social workers, having more of a relationship with the family, and then they facilitate those meetings. And there's been a big push around them really focusing in on our conversations about significant harm, which I think we've lost a bit. So that going into a strat, quickly going into a section 47 without really thinking about what significant harm means and whether we can manage these some of the harmful things that might be happening at a lower level and with a different intervention, but still achieving the same outcomes.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to respond to any of that? Anything on missing from care?
No, I mean, I'm not sure whether I'm going to answer the question, but the way we would deal with missing from homes, we have a exploitation team, so that it's not actually managed within the vulnerability hub. The notifications come from the exploitation team, and they would attend any strategy meeting. But I'm not sure that was the question that you were asking specifically. I'm not sure whether that's more social care related. Again, it's because we have 4 different local authorities, each work differently. Some have, I know that you have a complex case team, don't you, with Jay on it, and they work very closely with our exploitation teams when it comes to CSE, CE, missing from homes. We have missing from home teams, missing from home coordinators, and they obviously work closely with social care. But there's different agencies that work with different local authorities. I'm aware that a lot of return interviews are done in Cheshire by We Are With You, and then over on the east, they do them themselves. So it's quite difficult for me to give a ballpark answer to that, I'm afraid.
Okay, let's take 3 more questions, please.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the health contribution in the multi-agency child protection hubs and what expertise has been found to work.
Hi, just interested really in terms of sort of staffing and levels of skills and experience, but particularly in the sort of lead child protection roles, and sort of if you had any gaps, if you had to offer any incentives to get people into those roles.
Thank you. And one behind you.
Hi, this is a question for Claire. It's around having 4 local authorities with 1 on a Pathfinder and 3 not. Have you found that as a police force you're having to deliver 4 different levels of service?
Good one.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with the health. We've got the health contribution. We've got staffing and skills levels for the lead practitioner roles. Do you want to, actually, Amanda, do you want to respond to any of those?
Health-wise, so we've realised early on in this that actually, I described it last time as like health is like a whole different continent that we realised we didn't know much about. So, you know, we initially joked at the beginning in saying when it comes to the MAC-PT, we just need a super nurse. And actually we realised that that doesn't exist and that all nurses are super nurses. So Zoe often describes it as kind of working backwards, and I think that we've done a lot of that when it comes to all of our partners really, but health definitely stands out as being the one where we maybe had to do a lot of working backwards with it. So we knew we wanted a health representative on our MAC-PT, and we've been successful in obtaining that. Obviously, we had to think about resource within that. So for us, our health nurse comes from a safeguarding background. So she's one of our safeguarding nurses. And we had to think about banding, which was all new for us to understand as well. So thinking about who was at that level where they could almost wear 2 hats. So a strategic hat in thinking about what data and what things we were looking at, how effective this role was, but also an operational one in being able to go out, visit families, offer consultation with our workforce, and do a bit more of that hands-on approach as well. So in terms of the releasing of that role, we were able to have a nurse join us for 2 days a week, and we're constantly thinking about how we expand on that. the feedback that we've had from health collectively has been that, you know, there's been some parts where it's been felt that we're only targeting one area and actually there's other areas to consider. But we've also recognised the need. We have a lot of steering groups now. So we've got an operational steering group and a strategic one. And we have health colleagues represented within each of those. But we actually recognise that health itself needs its own subgroup. So we now have a subgroup specifically for health, and we have a representative, our lead on health now we've identified as being our designated nurse within the authority, who is therefore in a really good position to be able to have that helicopter perspective on who we need to be bringing into that group and what that should look like. And I think we've had some really good examples of where that role has worked really effectively in making sure right support at right time, where our health nurse, our safeguarding nurse, she's been really good at being that bridge between. So where we've got maybe health talking about not understanding some decisions that are made by social care and vice versa, she's really able to kind of switch hats in offering those two different lenses and just explaining, you know, what those processes look like. Sometimes her most helpful approach is just having those consultations with workers where maybe they're, you know, we've got family health practitioners or social workers who are working with a family who just need to understand a little bit more about a certain condition or a different service to refer to. And so it's been some of those smaller, softer conversations that have really helped to ease some pressure and help us to focus on the preventative work as opposed to escalating to strat so that we can gather that information. So yeah, it's been a massively helpful addition to the team, I think.
Can you pass it to Claire, please? Claire, are you delivering 4 different levels of service?
I wish the answer was no. But I mean, they are all at different stages, I would say, at the moment. It's always been a bugbear that obviously all the local authorities have different demographics, they have different ways of working, and we try and obviously fit into that as much as we can. But obviously we have to prioritise our police role as well. We have a responsibility for processing all of the police referrals that come in, secondary risk assessments, your domestic violence disclosures, your MARACs. So we have to make sure that that wheel's still turning while we're offering our services to the local authorities and trying to be there in a visible presence. So we have said to all the local authorities, obviously Warrington's been in Pathfinder for some time now, but in September we launched a 3-month pilot which basically placed 2 detective sergeants in each authority. So one in the north, we've got Bolton and Warrington, so one in each of those. And our promise was to have somebody there 2 days a week, and that individual will be their point of contact for continuity. And that's the same whether they're in Pathfinder, whether, you know, just on the start of MAC PT. But we have to be quite stringent with what we can offer. We have obviously limited resources. In an ideal world, we would have you know, a number of supporting officers with a DS there. But at the moment, we have operational investigation teams that still remain on area. So they are your local policing area that would do the investigations, and they have the exploitation teams as well on area. We manage the strategy meetings, and we are the bridge between social care and the investigation teams out on area. And so far, it's working well. We've had positive feedback, so we'll see how we are at the end of those 3 months.
I'm going to go to Rachel next, and then I'll come to you. So Rachel, can I come to you on the contribution from health to the multi-agency teams, please?
Yeah, so we've created a dedicated role with health, so we've worked quite closely with health from the very beginning. We initially recruited a strategic health lead, really to help us navigate our way through the health system that's quite complicated to those that aren't part of it, and also really to make sure that they were on the journey from the beginning. That was for the whole system, so end to end, they were engaged in sort of the family help space right the way through to child protection. In our child protection team, we specifically focused in the early days on establishing the LCPP role. I have quite a strong view that as local authorities, if you're trying to create your LCPP role, work out what the interface is with family help and what that co-working arrangement looks like, at the same time as trying to establish dedicated resource in your multi-agency child protection team, that can be quite challenging. So we focused on sort of establishing the LCPP role, getting that recruited to, embedding the ways of working and making sure that we were comfortable with that. So for the first phase of our child protection team sort of going live, we were really only tapped into the existing health and police resources. It's only been really since the beginning of this year that we started to have the more detailed discussions around what the dedicated resource would look like. So we've got now a dedicated DI from a police perspective, and in health we are working closely with Warsaw because they're another Pathfinder, they're a Wave 2 Pathfinder. We share an ICB, so it made sense for us to do some joint work, and that's the one thing I would, urge people to do if there's opportunity, to consider geographical boundaries and where you can join up with other authorities. That can help, not just in terms of consistency, but in terms of economies of scale as well, if you are looking at dedicated positions. We've gone for a safeguarding level nurse in our MacPT. We've also been really keen to emphasise that they are not there to do all they're doing. They will not do all child protection work in that health space. They couldn't possibly. So we've really worked with our partners around, when we've got that dedicated resource, what will be the key areas of focus. So our first phase of this is around, they'll focus on cases that have been escalated, so where there's difference of opinions in child protection planning and the needs that objective or slightly more objective lens, where we need to challenge practitioners in terms of their thinking around what is significant harm. We have focused on same-day strats or urgent strats because we weren't getting those set up in a timely fashion, so we're using that dedicated resource from a health perspective to contribute to that. And also for child protection plans that have been open for over 15 months, which again is a cohort that we'd want to be making sure plans are progressing. So health are really engaged, and now it's just a case of waiting to see the real impact of that. Alongside that, we've got really good relationships with our paediatricians in terms of engagement at strats and obviously CP medicals and above. So that's really how it's working for us.
Thank you, Rachel. Alex, we had a question about skills levels and staffing in those lead practitioner roles.
So this was one of my biggest stresses. Every catch-up I had with the DFE, I had a panic about it. So we have our LCPs at essentially a senior practitioner level. And when we initially had an idea that they would case hold and they could take some of the heat out of the system, Wave 2 don't case hold, and so we had to kind of rethink slightly. So that created a real panic for me because essentially it took a chunk of my most experienced workers out of my social work teams. However, it's been more of a benefit than I recognised actually. So initially I thought, well, that caseload, where's that going? But seeing how the role is playing out in terms of being alongside less experienced workers has been hugely helpful, and we've seen an impact in terms of retention of staff. So our newly qualifieds have got that link where cases escalate, or maybe they're not that experienced with child protection. They've got even more enhanced layer of kind of support. So it has benefited us with that. There has been some, and we're still working through it around how power shows up in the kind of child protection meeting space, and are you a chair or are you a facilitator, and what happens when people have a different opinion. So we're trying to do a lot of case reflection in the Section 47 period. So we do a lot of kind of complex case group reflection. So we draw on the multi-agency partners in the CP team. So where there is a sort of fundamental difference in views within the professional group before conference, we kind of make use of that Section 47 time and the analysis that goes in that period, because on reflection I think we whiz through Section 47 investigations and assessments, making really critical decisions about families, without pausing and thinking about what that really means. So, yeah, did that answer your question? No more than usual. So we haven't recruited anyone from outside, only local people. But I envisage that, yes, it might be, because a lot of what we've done with the CP is very much about a kind of way of working, a culture, and I have an anxiety that you kind of need to see how people interact with people, how they talk about families, how they manage risk in a sensitive kind of relational human way. So it remains a worry for me about that team and not becoming the conference unit again. So, yeah.
Thank you. Nick, just last question from me, and I'm going to we've got time for 2 more questions before we finish. The virtual school and the virtual head. We've heard about the contribution of health into these teams. How does the virtual school and the virtual head fit into these reforms?
I can answer that as well. Okay.
Thank you. We've been very lucky, really, in Wirral, because we have a fantastic virtual school head who's been very engaged with our education committee and with our designated safeguarding lead community of practice from a very, very early stage. And we've recently just appointed a deputy virtual head as well, who will sit on our education committee, and we're also going to sit her alongside the education representatives on the other committees as well. And really what we're trying to do at the moment is to align those priorities to include the work of the virtual school, so that we have a bit of congruence. So, for example, we've been looking at information sharing and how we can get information in a timely manner to the virtual school staff in terms of safeguarding, and we've got a big project with CPOMs that will include the virtual school as well. So I think we've been looking in terms of personnel, because we've got 2 people there in the virtual school head and the deputy head who are really buying into Pathfinder and elevating the role of education to a much more strategic level. And I think what's really important is we talk a lot, don't we, in these reforms about ensuring the voice and influence education is heard, but it's a 2-way process as well. And whilst education can bring a lot to a safeguarding partnership and can help the other agencies, education can learn a lot from the statutory partners as well. And I think the virtual school is a really good conduit for that, because they've kind of got that regular contact with both sides. So it's been great to have them on board. We realise we've still got a long way to go, but the early signs are that it's going to be a really fruitful partnership.
Can I just add, just to kind of add on to that in terms of an operational level, we can't really hang our the virtual school on the Pathfinder. It was already very much set up, but what this has done is helped us to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. So in our MACPT we have an education representative who is based within our virtual school but linked to the MACPT, so she makes sure she sits in our MACPT twice a week, but is also our link throughout the week at all times, and that's been really helpful in terms of, again, the same as when we spoke about Sally, our health worker, wearing those 2 different hats. So she's able to kind of act on behalf of the virtual school, complete pieces of work on behalf of allocated inclusion workers, whilst also linking into our MACPT and feeding in information around education. So it's just making sure that all that information is really triangulated, and that's been really helpful in a very short space of time.
Lovely, thank you. 3 minutes, 2 questions. Keep them brief.
I'd be really interested to hear from the Pathfinders how your MASA arrangements have changed, responded. I was really interested, Nick, in what you were describing around the education, but if anybody else could share that. Thanks.
Thank you. And one more.
Just interested in how your experience as a Pathfinder changed the way you thought about any upcoming Ofsted inspections. You made a comment about that you were, things you needed to satisfy for Ofsted coming in, and just like whether you felt Ofsted was pulling in the same direction as reforms, or anything that you felt was contrary.
Thank you. Are you going to take the Ofsted question? Who's going to take the MASA question?
I can. I think we're
In terms of the MASA question, we have a pretty solid safeguarding partnership in Warrington. We're really lucky. We came to an event yesterday where, again, it was already very much established, and we were very lucky to be able to kind of fall on the back of that. Some of the meetings that were already kind of set up in terms of links with academy trusts, for instance, those other little pockets that we wouldn't necessarily consider coming from an entirely different perspective. One thing is our MASA have been very responsive in terms of having the education as the fourth partner, and I know guidance-wise it's not quite there, but we've already kind of jumped ahead with that. So we make sure that we've got representatives from 4 key partners now right at the top. And there's all sorts of kind of conversations going on there, which really then help filter through. So it's little things like our team managers then having the opportunity to go along to our head teachers meetings that we wouldn't necessarily have known about before, that the partnerships helped us really set that up. So I would say it's pretty solid, but we can't take credit for that as changes within the Pathfinder, really.
Rachel, last response from you. Do you want to address any of those questions?
Yeah, I think similar really to Amanda. So we've got a strategic education lead that now sits at our sort of exec level of our safeguarding partnership. We haven't given that role at the moment sort of voting rights, if you like. They're there as in an advisory capacity, but that's really helped to strengthen that link back to the sector. I think one of the things we've been quite keen to remember is that it's more than just schools. And I think we sometimes slip into just talking about schools rather than the wider sector itself. And we've got good representation now at all of our priority groups, subgroups that sit underneath the exec level. I think one of the challenges, though, has been around the sort of establishment of the LSP, DSP arrangements locally and what that looks like. We've sort of grappled with that across the West Midlands. You know, when you share an ICB and a police force, how do you get your LSPs to be really cited on local practice? So we've sort of gathered a Black Country consortium with four of the authorities to try and get LSPs together sort of 2 or 3 times a year to overcome that. But a lot of our arrangements were already pretty much in line with working together, so we hadn't got an independent chair, for example. So that's sort of mass arrangements.
But Rachel, I'm going to have to stop you there because
No
we're going
worries.
to run out of time. Can we all thank Rachel for joining us from Wolverhampton today?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Last word is going to go to Alex on Ofsted. 30 seconds.
What a way out. In terms of, I said before about the must-do, so we've kind of led with that. So we've had lots of exciting ideas, and I do have a tendency to go, we're going to do all of this and throw out the rule book, and then it'll all go terribly wrong. So we've led with what are the things that we still have to satisfy we've done. So one example of that was we had all these ideas about our single assessment, but actually when you look at the reporting that comes from your assessment, from a social care perspective for early help, we've got supporting families and things like that. We had to start with what do we need to make sure we've satisfied, what are our timescales, what are we going to have to report on, because things hadn't changed kind of with particularly as a Pathfinder. So that's where we started from. So we said, right, what are our must-dos, what's our domain of production, but how can we deliver that in a more relational way, and where can we innovate where it's safe to do so in terms of meeting our sort of statutory obligations. I wouldn't feel able to comment too much on what the position of Ofsted, but we have had some conversations, and I would get a sense that it's like I've just said, are you still delivering what you need to? How you do that is a kind of a local level. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much. So we need to draw this to a close. Thank you, Alex and Amanda and Claire, and thank you also to Nick from Wirral. It's been an excellent session. It's been really good. And whilst we've been speaking, it's stopped raining and the sun has come out, which is just a sign of things to come. So thank you. Can we thank them all, everybody, please?